This is the first part of Chapter 4 from the book The Third Temple. Beneath the Kremlin, an aging ruler drifts through memory, fear, and madness, until a message from the far side of the moon brings an ancient voice back into the room. As screens flicker to life, the story shifts, to Abraham and Sarah. A tale of exile, love, bitterness, and the impossible promise of a child. To be continued.
The Third Temple. The End of the Beginning. By Alex Gerald. Chapter 4. In the bunker. The hall was steeped in twilight. Dim lights glowed faintly along the walls, their weak beams barely cutting through the heavy shadows. The grand chandelier above the long table didn't illuminate the space, it merely hinted at its presence, outlining a blurred silhouette. Platov sat slouched in a wide chair near the stage. 3 dance poles gleamed faintly in the sparse light, making the atmosphere even more oppressive. Behind the chair stood an elderly woman in a vintage dress from the 60s, motionless, like a ghost from the past. Suddenly, Platov sobbed. At first quietly, almost imperceptibly, but soon his breathing became ragged, and he began to weep, rocking back and forth. "Mommy, don't give me away, don't throw me out, please," he murmured, repeating the words again and again. Yevdokia Petrovna knew her role by heart. She stepped forward quickly, embraced him, and pressed his head to her chest. Gently, she ran her hand over his thinning, nearly vanished hair. "I won't let anyone take you, my baby. You'll stay with me," she whispered. At the same time, her hand subtly pressed a button on the chair's armrest. The door swung open instantly, and a doctor entered briskly, already holding a prepared syringe. Calmly, professionally, he injected the fluid, watching the patient's reaction. "That's the second time this month I've doubled the dose. This won't end well. For me," he muttered under his breath. Suddenly, Platov jolted and shoved Yevdokia Petrovna away. "Get off me, bitch," he barked. The woman couldn't keep her footing and fell to the floor. "And for this, they pay me well," flashed through her mind. Struggling to her feet, she glanced at the doctor, and the two of them silently left the hall. Platov, pointing at the poles on the stage, suddenly burst into laughter. "She smashed her nose real good that time." He trembled with laughter, remembering how just a few years ago, he and his cronies had partied here with half-naked girls. One of them had slipped off the pole and crashed to the floor, smashing her face bloody. They whisked her away quickly, but it had seemed hysterically funny at the time. Everyone laughed. Not long ago, this place had been alive. Strip shows. A pool. Dozens of bedrooms for relaxation. A hockey rink just off the building. He could feel it again, racing across the ice, scoring goal after goal. Wrestling the best judo fighters and always winning. His signature move, the hip throw, was flawless. Sometimes they brought in criminal bosses from prisons. Special forces staged no-rules fight training, smashing gangster faces into pulp. Sometimes, possibly to death. It had been fun. A lot of fun. Platov raised his hand and wiggled his fingers. From a dark corner, a guard emerged immediately. He walked over to the chair, helped the president to his feet, and, supporting him by the arm, guided him to the table. Carefully, he seated him at the head, adjusting the chair. Platov lazily twirled his finger in the air. Instantly, all the lights flared to full brightness. Across the table, 5 meters away, sat Rodov, FSB Chief, and Zverev. Intermediate, so-called, president. Even from here, it was obvious Zverev was high. His gaze wandered, and his lips curled into a vacant smile. In the center of the table sat a man suspiciously similar to Platov himself. Kolya, the double. Waiters shuffled into the hall, white aprons tied directly over bare bodies. They quickly set the dishes on the table. Once, the sight of firm, bouncing buttocks had thrilled him. Now, he didn't care. Platov's hands trembled slightly. He gripped the edge of the table to steady them. Rodov rose from his seat. "Vladimir, may I report on the situation regarding the incident today, the one involving our helicopter and the so-called extraterrestrials?" Platov squinted slightly. "Proceed." Kolya, the double, leaned back in his chair and lazily waved his hand. Go ahead. Rodov shot him a look filled with hatred but stopped short. He pursed his lips, forcing a sycophantic smile. A thought flashed in his mind, hell if I know which one is real. Platov loved to screw with us like this. He cleared his throat and continued. This morning, we intercepted a transmission via an old American satellite, Telstar 2. It may be a fake. However, we've determined the source of the signal is the far side of the moon. Platov's face didn't change, but his brow twitched slightly. What kind of transmission? It's related to the Jewish Torah. Because of this, we invited a rabbi, his opinion might be of value. Platov tilted his head. Who exactly? Rodov picked up a paper from the table, brought it closer to his eyes, and read. Alexander Bergman. He's the head of the Jewish religious community. You might remember him. He attended your meeting with Netanyahu. Yes, yes. I vaguely recall. Bring him in. An elderly, bearded man entered the hall accompanied by a guard. Dressed in a black suit and a yarmulke, he held a wide-brimmed Hasidic hat in his hands. Platov, good afternoon, Alexander Moiseyevich. Good afternoon, Mr. President, Birdman replied with a slight lisp. Rodov, we're going to show you several videos based on Torah episodes. We're interested in your interpretation. Birdman, of course, of course. I'm ready. On all four massive television screens, the first image appeared. The moon, in its final phase, floated like a thin silver crescent among the slowly drifting clouds. A few stars still clung to the sky, their flicker fading as a new light began to bloom in the east. A rare, cold wind crept along the stones of Hebron, as if searching for a place to hide from the approaching day. Abraham sat, hunched toward his son, one arm around Isaac's shoulders. To their left, in the shadow of a rock, gaped the entrance to the cave of Machpelah. He had buried Sarah there the day before. Isaac was sobbing openly. He was 14. He knew a man shouldn't cry, especially in front of his father. But he couldn't help it. His mother had been the only one who truly protected him. He loved Abraham, but he feared him too. To the point of nausea. To the pit of his stomach. To the dreams where his father stood over him with a knife, huge, gleaming, far too close to his chest. He'd wake up gasping, choking on silent screams. Only his mother's soft hands and the rhythm of her heart could bring him back to breath. Sarah often told him how it all began. Sometimes with sadness. Sometimes with laughter that turned to tears. Abraham was always there. I loved him for as long as I can remember. She was nearly 10 years younger, but from early childhood, she looked up to him as something more than a brother. He was her entire world. She was 7 when enraged Sumerians came to their house in Ur. Abraham had destroyed one of their altars. Execution awaited him. Their father, Terach, had seized both children without hesitation. He gave up everything to save his son and daughter. They fled to Haran. In Haran, we were welcomed, Sarah would say. Our father was Aramean, and the Arameans have long memories. Our people recognized their own. Abraham barely noticed her. To him, she was still a child. He looked at Aramean girls instead. Terach, annoyed, insisted, let him marry Sarah. Sarah was overjoyed. Soon they took in Lot, a young orphan. Sarah became his mother, though she herself was still a girl. Everything changed after Terach's death. Abraham became different. One night he came to Sarah and said, I've been commanded to go. To a land I will be shown. He walked ahead, never looking back. Behind him, 100 paces behind, followed Sarah and Lot. He always said he wanted a son, but I couldn't. I was empty. A body that didn't know how. I hated myself. One day, in fury and sorrow, Sarah hurled her Egyptian servant toward him. You want a son? Take her. Let her give you one. That's how Ishmael was born. And everything got worse. Abraham spent his days with the boy, and with Sarah only rare, silent evenings. At night, she would pray, cry in the dark, plead, God, just once. Give me a child, even for a moment. Then everything changed. It was a hot day by the oaks of Mamre. Sarah sat inside the tent, watching Abraham from the opening. 3 men approached him, dressed like wanderers, but she had seen beings like them before, in Haran. Abraham bowed low, washed their feet, and ordered bread and meat to be brought. From behind the curtain, Sarah watched and felt time stand still. One of them, Michael, lifted his gaze toward the tent and said, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" In the tent, Abraham replied, "A year from now, she will hold a son in her arms." Sarah laughed. Not in scorn, but bitterly. It couldn't be. Everything womanly in her was gone. Abraham was an old man, and she just a dry shadow. Her laughter wasn't disbelief. It was pain. But that very night, everything began to change. First, her skin, it began to glow, to smooth. Then her hair. Then her eyes. In the morning, looking into a water basin, she didn't recognize her reflection. Abraham stood to the side, silent. His hands trembled. He felt his veins fill with life. His joints no longer ached. He could run. He could love. Like in youth. They left. Neighbors began to whisper. People sensed something beyond human was happening. There was Egypt. And once again, the lie, she is my sister. But this time Sarah wasn't afraid. She already felt the life inside her. She knew everything would be good. She conceived. She felt it at night, as Abraham held her hand. No signs. Just a certainty growing from within. You were born, Isaac, she would tell him. And everything changed. Abraham carried me in his arms. He laughed with you. He breathed, he finally loved me, truly. Platov pressed the pause.
The second part of this chapter, including the conclusion of Abraham and Sarah's story, will be available in the next video. You'll find the link below or in the description. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps more than you think. And if you know someone who'd appreciate this story, share it with them. Thank you for watching. See you in the next episode.